Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 53 of the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. I got all that out without stuttering or looking to the left to see what the number was on the screen. You'll have to take my word for that. You don't have to, you can see it on your own screen. Having said that, I'm Jeff Welton, and we're going to have some fun today. As always, today we are going with something that was brought up in a couple of the, we always ask when folks register, hey, what would you like us to talk about? And a couple of people have mentioned configuring presets. And of course, it's one of those things that, as most people know from last week's episode, we're finally starting to switch over the AUI to the new flash-free AUI. So we've got two different things to learn a little bit about. When it comes to that sort of thing, I always like to, as every show, defer to somebody smarter than me. So I reached out to customer service and enlisted the help of my good buddy, Scott MacLeod. Scott, welcome and thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. Don't know about smarter, but I was available on short notice.
There you go. Well, sometimes available is just as important as intelligent. And hey, look at it this way, between the two of us. So Scotty and I, when you started, how long you been with us? 25 years almost now?
Yeah, just over 25.
Yeah, see, so he's still a rookie in customer service years. But I think your first field trip, we went down to Albany for WPTR.
Man,
That
yes, yeah, that was one of the first.
big XL60. I see Amanda Hops in there, and I know I just left her dad at another webinar with the Alabama broadcasters. So, yep, that was Crawford Station then. Now, we are talking about configuring presets. We are going to talk about both the old AUI and the new one. We are going to, as always, run out of time because I've never finished one of these at 2 o'clock on the nose or 2 o'clock our time, at whatever time you happen to be in. I'm sure today will be no exception, but first, the mandatory housekeeping stuff. Okay, if you are if you've got a question, comment, criticism, concern, sarcasm, snark, don't promise that I'll bring it up in the topic in the session, but we will certainly rate it and comment about it over coffee later on. Certainly type it into the little window, hit the send button, and absolutely, if it's on topic, even if it's not really, I'll bring it in. Jerry Higgins has already waved his hand and said that he's here. So software for your laptop, desktop that simulates an Android to run applications for prayer develop. Holy smokes. Oh, so suggestion for later there. So people are using the question window already. By the same token, if you've got a microphone and you're not shy, feel free to hit the little hand wavy icon. We'll unmute you, make you part of the conversation. Scott likes it when you put him on the spot. It's always a lot more fun that way. So that is that. Now, one thing I do want to reference is with respect to the AUI and presets in general, there are a pile, and this was one of the advanced questions. Somebody asked, hey, how about a topic on setting up a VS transmitter in general, including those crazy rack slides? And so if you go to our website, or YouTube channel, there is a VS series unboxing video there, 15-minute video. And the bulk of that video is focused on putting those rack slides together. By the same token, when you get a new transmitter, you have a little USB stick in the top of the package for the VS transmitters, and that little USB stick contains this video on it. So it can save you a lot of grief. Your boss, Scotty, wants to know if that's a ray of light from above shining down to bless you. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, Scott is the golden child today, and I'm sure he picked that particular position very, very carefully. So one other thing that's worth talking about is presets. I won't say they're unique to Nautel, but it is something that not everybody does. And sometimes it's beneficial to be able to have a couple of different configurations. You may want to have a couple of different audio sources. You may want to have a different configuration for tower climber where you got to drop power. You may have a couple of different configurations for different frequencies if you're doing an M+1 backup for like running into a 1-bay broadband antenna at the studio to back up a couple of different stations. So having the ability to select pre-configured setups is just pretty cool because you can do it with a contact closure, right, Scott?
Sorry,
This
I
is
was
where
on
you
mute. Yes, that is correct. Yes.
So there are, like I say, with the how-tos on the YouTube channel, I checked this last night. There are 34 videos. Occasionally, the service folks will come up with a new topic and say, it'd be really cool if we get a lot of calls on this. It'd be really cool to have a video on it. And so then you get somebody like Scott. You guys have got your own little TV studio down there, don't you?
I don't know if I'd call it a studio, but it's got a camera.
There you go. So that right off the bat, that it's video. That is definitely TV. Joe Fleming has asked, got a college station with a VS300, have assorted notifications set for email. Is there a way to send logs on a regular basis? And old firmware at the moment, the short answer is no. It does require manual interdiction. Now, having said that, you can capture the meter readings and the logs and export them to Clipboard and then save them to CSV or Excel or Word or whatever. So we may touch on that, although that's a little out of the range of this. The other thing I wanted to talk about is current settings. Um, so this is the transmitter that I help out with in my infinite spare time. And I grabbed a screenshot last night. And one of the things you'll notice is that I'm on the current settings page. And a lot of folks will go into preset menu and just start making changes. And if you don't load a specific preset, you're making changes to current settings, which is cool until the first time the lights flicker and the power cycles, and then you're right back to where you were and you lost any changes you made, right? So the current settings is more if you want to make a temporary change, right, Scott?
Yeah, so in current settings, it's basically your active preset. Now, you shouldn't lose current settings based on an AC power outage, but certainly if you ever change presets, you will have lost all your settings. So
Okay.
yeah, it's basically current settings is just something if you want to go in, make a temporary change, and then change it back. Other than that, you should be saving it as a new preset.
Right. And the thing to notice is that whenever you make a change to anything, and here I just gone in and enabled the audio backup on our running preset, and you can see the asterisk that shows up at the top to tell me that a change has been made. And by the same token, when you save it, it shows on the main screen that that preset has been changed, but it isn't currently activated, and you have to physically activate it to clear the asterisks. So you would go in, select it, and activate it. And of course, at this point, I canceled out because I wasn't about to change the on-air status of my station. So, how many different presets can you use? Scott Marco's asking. It's well up into the 40 or 50 range, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a good question. To be honest, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think we're talking you can have like over 60 presets.
Yeah. So, and again, in the preset, anything that you can configure in a preset, you could change one item of it. You might have two presets virtually identical, except have different Orban processor settings on one to the other. So you can day night, or if you wanted to day part for a different program, maybe you're doing some tweaking and you want to be able to switch back and forth easily to let the program director hear what it sounds like. So, and Marco's asking for each model, but where we've got the AUI is since version 4 been pretty much standardized, it's not a lot different from one model to the other anymore. So it's, yeah, the number is not going to change regardless of which, but it's well over 50 anyway. All right,
Yeah, and setting up the
then,
presets is always the same for each transmitter type too. The preset AUI is the same.
and then we've got the new, and we're talking new AUI now. New AUI is kind of obviously we're still in very early beta stage. I'm going to put this on the table right now that the beta is out. However, like I said, it's very early beta stage. We're asking folks, I mean, Matt's been very selective about who he sends it out to. And that's specifically because he only wants it to go to people that are testing it on a bench transmitter. We don't want it put on the air till we've been a little more certain that it's got some runtime on it, you know. It's just like I typically am not the guy to buy the first model year of any new car. I'd like to see some hours on this before I start putting it on the air. So Scott, on that note, I am going to hand control over to you. We can run old AUI, new AUI, and we'll have a little fun. So you should have the pop-up now that says you get to be the presenter. Click the little drop-down arrow, tell us what we're presenting, and let's go play.
All right, I'm waiting. I have not seen the presenter
Oh,
yet.
well, wait till I hit the yes button. There you go.
There you
You should see it now. And Gary Langley's asking what the ETA is for the on-air release of the new AUI. And we covered a lot of that last week with Matt Herden in the archive, Gary. But the short answer is that we are going to run this version 1 beta for at least a month. Version 2, and it's a pretty limited release. There were a lot of features that were left out. Um, that's top layer stuff that's easy to change. It's more making sure we get the operating system and the abstraction layer that connects it to the hardware right. Once we've got that confidence, then the new AUI, the version 2 beta, will be released. And that one you could reasonably comfortably put on the air. It should be in a month or so. Matt's goal is to have everything done in the next 6 to 9 months, but if he thinks it's going to be a year to have the quality there, then it'll be a year. I mean, ultimately, you know, we've waited this long for it. We're not going to sacrifice it for speed, but target for VS is to have a working, fully functional beta out by the end of this year. All right, so Scott, you should have the helm, I believe. Let's see where we go.
Okay. We're all looking at the old AUI, Jeff? Is
Yep,
that
I
what you're
see it
seeing?
down there. I've got about 8 things on 2 different monitors, so I do see it, but
So we'll
so
go
carry on.
through a preset setting on the old AUI, and then we'll go to the beta version of the new AUI, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences. I'll talk a little bit about the limitations of the new AUI, but keep in mind the new one we're going to look at is a beta release, and it could go through a couple versions before we go to a production release on it. So the first thing I like to do before I set up my preset is I like to look at my audio inputs, because one of the things we're doing is we're broadcasting content. So in the meter screen, we're just going to look at what audio content we have available to broadcast. So this is my exciter meters. I don't have any analog left or right. I have a MPX source terminated, and I can see the level here. It's 1.76 volts peak to peak, and I have no AES or no other audio source. So the only content source I have right now is the MPX input. So to go in the presets, it's simply menu, presets, which immediately takes you to current settings. So any change I make here will change current settings, not an active, not a saved preset. So we'll just go through the general settings and then we'll make some changes. So in the general tab, you can set up the output power, carrier frequency, and the mode of operation. This is a VS300 I'm working on, and it doesn't have an HD box, so it's FM mode. In the main audio tab is where you set up the content that you want to broadcast. For source, I've selected MPX, and the level that's represented here is the level required to give me 100% modulation. So for example, we can see in this example right now, I'm not RF on, but you can see the FM modulation is peaking at 50%. If I wanted to increase that, I could lower this number, and I'll lower it to 1.8 volts peak to peak. I'll just save it to my current settings. And you can see now I'm closer to 100% modulation. So this is the level you would adjust to increase the modulation level if you wanted. You can select different sources as well, analog left and right, MPX over AES, or digital. And then there's the audio player. We won't go into setting up an audio player today unless there's questions, I guess. But if you select analog left and right, you get more options. You get the analog level again, which is in dBu. You can select the mode type. So are you feeding in a mono signal? Are you broadcasting stereo? If you select stereo in the analog left and right, the transmitter will generate pilot. Low pass filters just for your audio input. Pre-emphasis. In North America, we're running 75 microseconds pre-emphasis. Typically, this is done in your processor, but if you want the transmitter to do it, you can enable pre-emphasis by selecting 75 microseconds. 50 microseconds is an option, but that is for overseas. I think Europe might be 50 microseconds. I see a lot of people playing with the main audio gain adjust. This was added in some version of software, some 4.0 version of software, and is carried on, but I don't think there's a real benefit to it. I would suggest that everyone leaves main audio gain adjust to 0. Don't add gain there. We will select our modulation level by adjusting the analog level. Depending on the version of VS software you're using, you have the option to enable an audio backup. Now, what this allows you to do is if you have 2 audio sources connected to the transmitter, if the main audio fails within a time that you set up in audio thresholds, typically 20 seconds, within 20 seconds, it will switch to the audio backup. And the audio backup, it obviously can't be the same audio source. It would have to be something different. And so if you lose your main audio source, you'll switch to the audio backup. If the main audio source comes back for more than 1 second, the transmitter will automatically switch to the main audio content.
Now, one caveat, one thing to add there is that when you do this, the threshold for how long and how low is done on a different screen, and you need to be very careful not to set it so low that your pilot is keeping you on the same one. Like if you set the threshold at 5% and you've got pilot and RDS running, it
Oh
will
no, this
detect
is
those. No,
that's
is that out
no,
now?
no.
Okay.
So
Oh, Jeff is
that's the
wrong.
difference between audio backup and modulation, and low level modulation. We'll talk about that when we move back.
Cool.
This is simply looking at the audio level, and the limits are set up in the user settings under audio low thresholds, and you'll see that the low trip levels are like, you know, minus 22 dB. So your audio would have to go away to nothing. Like you'd have to
Nothing.
lose your analog main audio or lose your AES
Okay.
completely. And then
Right.
the
I was
threshold,
thinking of the one that looks at the mod monitor.
right? This is not looking at mod. It's only looking at the audio levels and set up here. And you can use the defaults, 20 seconds to change over, and minus 22. It works great, and that means your audio is pretty well gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll zip back to the preset.
Now, Gary's asking, what audio are you feeding right now, and is it test tones? What frequency are you using?
Right now, I have a function generator set at 1 kilohertz going into the MPX. That's all I have fed in right now. I don't have any other source connected to this one.
Cool.
The next one we look at, I think, will have a actual audio content.
Yeah. Side note for Javad, he's asking if the video will be available. And yeah, we archive all of our webinars. If you go to our YouTube channel, the Tech Talk or Transmission Talk Tuesdays, I haven't called it that for a long while, but the TTT sessions are all archived as a one of the playlists.
So the audio backup is a great feature that was added in VS Software 5.2.1. The only limitations are, of course, you have to have a different audio source. And with the VS series and the NV Lite series, you cannot have the main audio source as AES and the backup as audio player, because they're both measured as AES in the transmitter, so it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. So you have to pick like a MPX and analog, or AES and MPX, or analog and AES, something like that.
Now, the other thing, thing you can do to sort of two-step it is to use a couple of different presets. Have one configured to MPX with nothing on it. No, that wouldn't work either. There was a way that I'd worked around. I'll have to dig that up if
You
anybody's
could do it.
interested.
You could do it using mod loss
Yeah,
and change presets, and then you could go back. Then you could use the audio player as a backup to an AES feed. You just can't do
right.
it as in the main audio backup.
Yeah. Now, Williams asked how you do set up the audio player, so that's something. And MPX over AES, same deal, right? Because it's all on the AES input at that point.
Yeah, it's just a source. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There's nothing to set that up. You just select it, and it's looking at the AES input for an MPX, the AES over MPX source, MPX over AES. Sorry.
right.
We can look at the audio player in a sec. We'll just zip through
Yep.
these tabs quick. So this is your main audio source. And remember, just keep in mind, if you are trying to change your modulation level, if your modulation is too low, this is the number you're changing. The digital level, if you're AES, or if you have analog left and right, the analog dBu level, the lower this number is, the lower audio content you need to get 100% modulation. So right now we're at MPX and 1.8. SCAs, you can enable them. You can use internal SCAs, or you can use the BNC MPX SCA at the back. To enable them, you just simply enable. And for the MPX SCA level, you select once again, the level to give you 10% modulation. So if you feed in 3.5 volts peak to your MPX SCA, you'll get 10% modulation on your MPX. If you want to use an internal SCA, which means you're feeding in the audio content, but the transmitter is generating the carrier for it to modulate on, then you select internal SCA. You'll feed in your analog SCA content into a D sub at the back of the transmitter, and you just select your injection level and the frequency you want it to work at.
Now,
Once
here's
again,
a question.
sure.
Here's a question I get on occasion. If, for example, I'm running, say, a Automat or an Innovonics, one of the external RDS generators, they send out an MPX modulated RDS signal. And for that, you have to enable the MPX SCA, but you do not have to enable the internal RDS unless you want a separate static, right?
That is correct. If you're feeding, I mean, really, the MPX SCA should be like it's another MPX input that is not the main audio MPX input. So if you're feeding in a modulated something on MPX, whether it's RDS, SCA, you would enable that here. Even though it is an RDS, you would enable that input to be that content to be placed on the broadband, the baseband of the transmitter.
Right.
Correct. So right, you would enable the MPX SCA, and then you could also enable the internal SCA if you wanted to have SCAs and they weren't part of your RDS MPX that you were feeding in. Correct.
Right. Like if
So
you
this
had a
is
reading service or something like that.
yep, exactly. So once again, there's two different SCAs, there are two different audio inputs, and you just set them up with the same content that you would basically your main audio, except you include the frequency that you want modulated on. Low pass filter, you can enable it or disable it. And then the preemphasis would once again would be 75 microseconds. RDSs, as Jeff mentioned, so there's a number of ways you can feed in RDS. One is an already modulated RDS on an MPX, which means you're actually feeding it into the SCA and you're going to enable the composite SCA. If you're feeding in the RDS data, you can feed it in over IP. It's port 7005. It is not configurable. You can send it over serial, and that serial can be ASCII or UECP. Or you can set it to internal, which means you're not feeding in data. You're just going to have a static RDS message. And then regardless of the source you selected, you fill out the injection level and then the information for your RDS.
Right. Now,
And
one of
if
the things that I see some folks get confused on, when you say static RDS message, that just means the message doesn't change. It doesn't mean that you can't do a 64 character scrolling message, which is something similar but different.
correct. So once again, VS code 521 or 4.3, although typically people aren't using 4.3 anymore. I would say
I am.
the two versions for VS transmitters I think you should be running is either 4.2.6 or 5.2.1. Either one is okay. 5.2.1 has the added features, which includes allowing scrolling RDS if you're feeding in data or static. And also allows the audio player, the 5.2.1 software. But so this is where you would enable your RDS and set up your static information. If you're feeding in data, if the transmitter doesn't receive the data, it will broadcast the static message that you've selected. If you start getting data, it will update the data, not in the static field, but you will update the RDS message being broadcast.
Right. Jawad's asking, planning to use the Arctic Palm with Omnia 9 for RDS. What settings will I use? And Arctic Palm is the middleware. It sends out the RDS data in an actual IP format. So for that, you'd be using the ASCII over IP.
Correct. And you
And
would
then
be
you have to
directing it to
remember,
7005, port
that's where I was
7005.
going. Yeah, the Arctic Palm has to point to the transmitter IP address and the port number. And 2 or 3 TTTs ago, we had Tom Lawler on, and we were talking about that. And that we were talking about gizmos and gadgets. And one of the things he referenced was a freeware program that you can load that would let you hook in at the transmitter end and actually see the RDS data there, which will let you know if you're making it from your studio, from the Arctic Palm software, whatever device it's loaded on, to the transmitter. And that's because I'm sure from your perspective, that must be one of the biggest challenges is, it looks good leaving here from the automation system, but is it actually making it to the transmitter through various port forwarding and routers, whatever have you?
Yes, yeah. And certainly that's a question we get. How do I, if they're broadcasting their RDS, how do they know they're getting it? Now, obviously the receiver's the way to go, but to verify if your transmitter's getting it. But there is a version of software that has an RDS decoder on it. Maybe that's just in the NV Lite, but it's only locally, not
Right.
remotely. So that's RDS. In other settings, the things we can add, audio delay, that's only if you were doing like, if you were doing HD, you could delay your analog audio here, or if you're trying to do a single frequency networking, that's one of the things that you would have to set. Mod loss timeout is very similar to can be very similar to the audio, the main audio and backup audio that we were talking about earlier. If you enable it, you can select an action. It can be none, which means it'll just generate an alarm. RF inhibit, which means you will inhibit power. The power will go to 0, which I don't think anyone uses. Or you can change preset. So this is where you can set one preset up for an AES feed. And if the AES feed goes away, your modulation drops, you can force it to change to another preset that is running a USB playlist. The only disadvantage of mod loss, it will not automatically switch back. So you'd have to have almost play like in your playlist, if you wanted to get it to switch back again, you'd have to put in a dead song so that it loses audio for 20 seconds or so and then changes back. And as Jeff mentioned, the threshold is important to set here, because if you are feeding in RDSs or SCAs, or you're feeding in analog and selecting a stereo, the transmitter's generating pilot, it'll never get to 0%. So you have to set a threshold up that is above the modulation level when you lose audio. So typically, if you're generating stereo in the transmitter, that's 9%, then 5% for your RDS, maybe 5 to 10% for your SCAs. So you'd set your threshold up for some level like 30%, and you'd set the time level for, 20 seconds or whatever time level you want before it makes the changeover. And
Yeah.
then you would just,
I'm going to dump you back to RDS for a moment because we still got questions coming in on that.
sure.
So Gary mentions that he just changed to Pura 332 external encoders because using the Patapult program from Encode to send directly to port 7005 on VSNV and NV Lite transmitters would randomly lock up the AUIs and cause connection losses, with the VS doing it more often. And I can address that because I've seen it with another automation company that starts with, well, it doesn't matter what brand, but especially with the VS, where you've got an ARM processor that is running at a good percentage of its capacity at the best of times. If you send the RDS data too often, you will overwhelm that thing in a heartbeat. And yeah, you can have that, or you can see situations where you may play a song and everything looks good. You may play a song and it shows some of the characters, or it shows the characters from the last song. So in a lot of cases, backing it down helps. I mean, on our system, and I showed a couple of screens from it earlier, but we run at the moment, we're running Playout 1 Pro, I believe, and we've got it configured to send the data once every cart change. So every time we fire a new spot, line, or song, whatever, it sends the data, and it sends it once only. And so that's one thing to look at, because one of the automation vendors did an update, and in the process, they set the default to send the RDS data every half a second, and it was just overwhelming the front end of the transmitter. So yeah, absolutely. Sending the data too often can cause the thing you're talking about, that Gary, and it might be changing to Pura just happened that the default setting is a more sedate pace. Scott, what about on your end? Do you run into calls like that on occasion?
Yeah, same. The the ARM processor is only so big. So if you're using stuff like SNMP, RDS over IP, and you're doing constant get commands, or you're doing constant sending of data over RDS, it can cause the ARM to stop responding.
Yeah,
And typically an ARM reboot, or sometimes the watchdog will give it a kick to get it going again. But yes,
right.
I've definitely seen
So
it.
so there are options to wake it up, but absolutely, the less you can, the less data you bog down on the network, the faster or the better things will work overall. Will HD injection ratios or injection levels affect the RDS display? And I'm going to guess that it shouldn't, but what have you seen on that? Does higher level HD injection make a difference
Yeah,
as
well,
far as interfering with it?
it can start to interfere with it if you're running MP3 and higher injection levels and you're modulating heavily. But typically, I would not expect it to affect the RDS. SCAs maybe, but typically not the RDS. And usually it's the nine, it's the further out SCAs, the 92 kilohertz and stuff.
Right. And let's see, Kevin fesses up new at this. We're currently using a separate computer to send RDS data through our Marty, so Nautel sends it to the tower. And that's exactly right. So you're sending the RDS data through your Marty STL, and that goes into the transmitter, and the transmitter broadcasts it as a subcarrier modulated onto your FM carrier so that a receiver can decode it. So yeah, that probably should have started with that explanation earlier on, but yes, very much. Okay, carry on, Scott.
Okay, so that was it for RDSs. Other settings we went through, audio delay and mod loss timeout. Certainly you can configure mod loss timeout in conjunction with the audio backup so that you can get, 3 or 4 different audio inputs. And I think there is a video on the website that talks about how to set all that up.
Yeah.
And then we have limiters, which just if your processing is questionable, then you can enable the different limiters so that you're staying in band. And the limiters, the hard limiter is, it's a chop, it's going to cut it off. So you're going to get a lot of distortion. The AGC limiter sort of lowers the gain a bit, so it's not as much distortion. Typically,
Now,
if you're, go ahead.
going to throw one thing in there. So the hard limiter is a clipper. The AGC limiter is a fast attack variable release, and you can see the time constant. If you hit that hard, and I've hit it with 160% modulation before, it will pump like a son of a gun. So just be aware that these are not meant to be, they're not meant to replace proper gain control. They're there just to keep you legal in if all else fails situation.
Yeah. If you're using the limiters to actually limit the modulation, you're going to get distortion. There is no doubt.
Yeah. One question from Jerry asked if the new AUI requires less horsepower from the ARM processor. And sort of yes, sort of no. The new AUI is 1/10 of the size. So the initial load when you load remotely is a whole lot faster. And it is configured to query the data only when it's required as opposed to pulling everything on a regular basis. So it does take less horsepower in that respect. But again, if you're hammering it with RDS data or a lot of SNMP requests, then you're still going to be in the situation where you could overwhelm it. So yeah, care and judicious use of your data. All right, back to you, Scott. Sorry.
So that's basically all the settings for the preset. We'll just go through. You'll see right now that the preset is showing a star SFCR on. That means the active preset or the selected preset was titled SFCR on, and we have made changes. We don't know what the changes are, but those changes are only in current settings. So if we activate the CFCR preset again, any change we made is lost. That is current settings. So if you want to actually make a preset, keeping in mind we are feeding in, we'll zip to Exciter, we are feeding in an MPX signal. I can create my preset here from current settings. So 8 watts, 98.1 megahertz, FM mode, good. My main audio is going to be MPX. My source is 1.76 volts peak to peak. I'm going to pick 1.8 volts to be my 100% mod. Audio backup is disabled. I'm going to leave SCAs and RDSs disabled. And I will not use any other settings. If I had an audio processor enabled, then there is another option in here to use the audio processor. I do not have one in my VS transmitter that we're looking at now, so I don't have the option to enable it and select presets. Now, when I'm saving this, I'm going to save it as new. I will call it MPX. MPX 1.8 volts peak to peak. 1.8 volts. Yeah, close enough. That's what I get for not wearing my
This
glasses.
is why you spend all day on the phone instead of typing, right?
That's
But
right.
yeah, you've got the ability to, you can load a preset, you can do a save as with it, you can just work off current settings like you did here, which is usually my preference just because that way I'm starting with something that I already know is running. Let's see, Javad's asking, my main feed is MPX over AES. Can I create a preset which will switch to analog input as a backup? And you absolutely can do that. That's the whole purpose of this. And
Software
then,
dependent. So there's two ways you can do it. You could, if you're
right,
running 5-to-1 software, you can do the audio backup. You can just enable analog left and right, depending on your audio source level, select the correct level for 100% mod.
tell it whether mono or stereo. And the thing to remember with the audio backup from the main audio tab is that it monitors your primary audio feed. So when it comes back, it will revert. If you use the mod loss on the other settings, it will not do that. It is a one-way. So if your main audio fails, it will fail over, like in your case, MPX over AES, it will fail over to the analog and it will not come back. So
Correct.
this is the one to use if you've got the option, but the other one is the sky has fallen, belt and braces, STL tower came down and I need the CD player on air type of solution.
Yep.
Yep. All right.
And
On that note, let's see. So yeah, keep going.
so the only other thing we'll talk about here is selecting presets, which is you select the active preset that you want to run using this drop down arrow. You select whichever one, and then you activate it, and that becomes your active preset. So the preset stores really all the important broadcast information: frequency, power level, audio source, RDS information. All of that is stored in each preset. And it's the same for VS, NV Lite, NV, GV.
Right.
They're all the same basic structure in presets.
Right. And I mean, the metering is independent of presets. That's more transmitter function.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So that's the old. If there's no other questions with the current existing one, we can go to the future HTML if you would like.
Yeah. Yeah. Bring it on.
All right. Let me see if I can get this over. So this is Matt Herden's transmitter. Are you seeing right now the new AUI, Jeff?
Yep. You're good to go. Yeah. And that's the second time I've seen this one today.
And it looks like, so from his meter reading, so this is the main page. We won't go through all the different menus in the string, but the thing to keep in mind for this beta version HTML software is it currently is only going to VS300 customers for non-critical
Yeah.
applications. If you're interested in trying it out, it is a diode of a move. If you go to HTML5 and don't like it, there is no choice to go back to Flash. You can't go back
No.
to the previous software. So once you do it, your HTML5 from now on, there'll be, of course, other HTML5 software releases, but you can
Right.
never go back to the Flash AUI. It doesn't support HD. It doesn't support audio player. And some of the functionality that exists in the current AUI, you just don't have access through the new version currently.
And again, keeping in mind, yeah, this is beta 1, so it's meant to be limited because we wanted to test the core functionality first.
Yeah, we wanted to get as much test cases out there and much different units as we can to find out how it responds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I found different, and I had trouble wrapping my head around it because, well, I'm older than you are, and it was the little hamburger thing that Matt calls it over to the right. And once I figured out that that was my menu button, life got a whole lot simpler.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so to get into the presets, we're going to go over to the hamburger button and we're going to go presets. Now, in the current version, you can't just create a new preset from scratch. Your existing presets will be shown here, and you can copy them. You can clone a preset, and it will make a copy of it. You can edit a preset, and you can delete presets. But you can't create one from nothing. So you have to start with a current preset of some sort.
And that may be one of the critical differences between the two AUIs, which was kind of the benefit of doing this side by side sort of session. We spent, of course, on the old AUI a lot of time talking about current settings and how you change it, and then you make everything. And if you don't save it to its own preset, then if you select a preset and go back, it'll be, you can lose what you did. Enough people had a lot of problems with that current settings is gone. So now you can just edit any preset at any time. And if it's on air, you'll change the on air. If it's not on air, you'll change that preset.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. So if you're not experienced with a lot of Nautel AUI, then the new HTML won't be a problem for you. It'll be really straightforward. If you're used to current settings, it might take you a little while to get used to the fact that there is no longer a active preset current settings preset. If you want to
Right.
change the on air, you can see right now I'm working at preset 2. If I want to edit it, it will change that saved version of the preset, but it will also change my active settings. So we're going to go in and just edit one. The menu wise, it's the same. It's the same as the old AUI. It
Yeah.
doesn't have the same bling and colors as the old one, but because we're HTML, we're not using Flash. And also, you will notice in here that this current beta version doesn't have units. So I will tell you what the units are, but it's a reported bug. They will add the units in the beta 2 or the whatever their next release is.
I mean, some of them are pretty obvious. If you're working on a 300-watt transmitter and it shows 40 something, I'm going to guess those are watts.
Right. It gets a little trickier when you're talking about audio inputs, but
Yeah.
yeah. So once again, you got the preset name here. We won't change the preset name. The preset ID is not changeable. It is the index number from the old version. Really, the only thing we use the preset 2 for is it's a channel that'll get tracked to the remote IO if you select it. But output power is output power. Frequency is your carrier frequency in megahertz. Output power is in watts. And the mode currently only supports FM, so there is no other mode selects. Main audio is just like the main audio in the old tab. You select your audio source. The only difference is this isn't showing you what the audio units are. So right now we have analog left and right, but you can select the same ones as before, MPX, whatever. Right now we're set to 2 for the analog level units. These are dBu units. And we'll look at the meters in this one. I think it was showing -6, I can't remember, but we'll look at the analog level sources. The audio mode, once again, you can be left and right stereo. If we select stereo, we'll generate a pilot. Might as well make a change, see what happens. 15 kilohertz low pass filter again. The preemphasis is enabled in this case. Audio gain adjust once again should always be set to 0, and the audio backup is the exact same as the old preset. So these are the same settings. If you're leaving the screen, you should save it. Okay, so
I
we
do
save
like
that.
that now it gives you the little confirmation pop up down in the corner to tell you, hey, you did this and
You've been done.
it changed.
So SCAs, once again, they're just like the other screen. There's no difference. You're just enabling the MPX again, setting the voltage level for it, or you're going to feed in your audio and select an internal SCA, and it's the exact same settings as before.
Yeah, and that was one thing they did a really good job of, was keeping the overall, even though the look has changed, the layout, the functions as they're presented are pretty much identical. So if you're used to one It's not that big a challenge to segue to the other once you get past that little hamburger menu button.
Yeah, the settings are the exact same. Um, the things to remember is this is the beta version. It will not, the audio player is you can't make any changes or do anything in the audio player. I think it'll
Right.
still let you select it as an audio source. So as long as you set it up, it may work. I'm not
Right.
100% sure.
Now, Ben has asked, when does a change take effect? Immediately or only after save? And it's
After
a little
save.
more than that too, because if it's not the on-air preset, then you'd have to actually select it to be the on-air preset to
Exactly.
impact the on-air. And that's why, like, I recommend typically, and I do this with the existing one too. I'll open the current mode or current settings or the on-air preset, and then I'll do a save as, give it a new name, and that'll be the one I mess around with and save. And then at whatever time it's convenient for the programming, I'll switch to that preset to activate the change. Now, this is a little side note. Keith has asked, and it's kind of a digression. I've never understood the EQ impulse response and EQ frequency response menu or meters displays on the original AUI. So he's
You
just
and me
wondering if you
both.
could
So
a lot of them are to do with exciter equalization during setup, aren't they?
yeah, so I'm trying to think of which, let's go back to the, because so, oh, also the new AUI, it'll only show you the spectrum analyzer. It doesn't have the other. So the
Stuff.
EQ impulse response, I've never used it. I have no idea what information this provides you of any use. The EQ frequency response is more like the LUT, and
Yeah.
it auto sets itself. So typically you could tell if it looked really funny, you might be able to determine, oh, there's something wrong, but it is not something that you, the user, would ever use. And I'm not sure when you would need to use it um, to do any troubleshooting, to be honest.
So it is one of those situations where during the setup stage, you've got the frequency response, the impulse response, the filter delay. Those are the three that come to mind that you're not typically going to use in the field. But if the thing ever needs to come home, then that's something that the support techs can look at and compare and say, oh, well, this is different. And so, again, from a exciter configuration and setup perspective, it might be beneficial, but it's not something we'd ever see in the field.
No, it's not something I use. I mean, to say I don't use it on a regular basis is implying that I would use it far more frequently than I do.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, sorry, digression, but scenic diversion, and back to the new AUI.
So the new AUI, just like uh, the previous AUI with all the different tabs, the tabs are the exact same. Other settings are the exact same. The only real difference between the new AUI and the old AUI is there is no current settings. You select presets based on um, based on the list. You can't create from scratch. You can clone and select, and we'll just go back to the main menu, go back
Oh,
into
that's
presets.
something else that's cool is being able to click on the logo to go back to the main screen rather than figuring out where it is in the drop-down menu.
So you can make any changes just by hitting edit. Matt asked me not to delete some of them, but if you want to delete a preset, you can just delete, yes. If it won't let you delete, cannot delete preset used in remote IO. So this preset was created, I think this is also a software bug, but this preset was created by cloning preset 1. Preset 1 is set to a remote input or output. So you can
For
manually
status, yeah.
select or yeah, status, or you can select it using remote IO. And since I copied it, even though this is index 4, if I try to delete it, it still shows it as you can't delete preset 1 because I copied it from that. So that is another small minor bug that has been reported. Also, this beta version, you cannot modify the remote AUI through this application. You'd have to go through the front panel.
Right.
So any remote.
Here's a good question from Steve. When you upgrade to the new AUI from the old one, will all your old presets transfer over, or are you going to have to start from scratch and rebuild them all?
Presets should all be the same. I have a little email
So
here.
I
Let
know
me see.
sometimes on an OS recovery, sometimes you blow out your user settings and have to redo those, like your user accounts, but presets
Presets should be
usually
the same.
stay. Yeah.
Presets should be the same, and it's the same with this. This doesn't change. This doesn't blast out your presets.
So there you go. That's a good thing.
And it doesn't change your remote IO. It doesn't change anything that you've already set. For example, if you have an internal processor and you've made your own, if you have the Orban inside option and you've made your own Orban inside presets, which is it's not our preset menu, it's the Orban inside. But if you've
Right.
modified any of those presets, they are saved and you can still select them in this software. You just can't create or modify them anymore. There is no interface with this new software to the Orban inside,
Right.
other than selecting it.
And Gary comes in with, just tell me you can't delete all the presets, because if you can, I'm sure there'll be a client who calls me with a what do I do now question.
Solid
And
question. And yes, I
yeah,
asked Matt that same question, and he said, no, you cannot delete all the presets.
right.
Keep in mind, I didn't
Even,
try it.
well, and so Matt just answered this question for me in another webinar. Even if you do manage to go into the remote IO and disassociate every single preset from all remote functionality, which would be, number one, really, really dumb, but number two, really difficult. However, even if you did do that, it will not let you delete the last preset.
Right.
So you can delete them all up to one, but you will always have at least one preset. So at least you've got a building block for when the customer does do those.
Yes.
And that's worth segueing into the user accounts on the new AUI, because these have changed a little bit, but it's a good idea. Of course, I beat the drum over and over. Don't use the default username and password. Change the default username and password. But if you go into the settings and the user accounts, um, what I would suggest is that most of your, especially for the contract folks, a lot of the clients don't need to have super user status, even on their own box. You know, you may scroll it down and leave it on a post-it note in a filing cabinet somewhere, but most of them are going to have read access or very limited turn the transmitter on and off, but not change the frequency or delete the presets. So, you know, that's again, that's comes back to how you configure. Like, let's just do a on the user accounts. Let's just grab one and open it up to edit.
This is probably a bad example because this is the admin.
Yeah, let's go to the other one and open it up to edit, just in case. So with this, you can see, you can tell them whether they're read only. I think you've got the ability to configure them for, well, like you can configure it for RF on and off, whether they can edit presets, whether they've got full admin, whether they can change the output power. So you may tell them they can turn it on and off and adjust the power if, say, a tower climber comes in or the FCC calls and says, drop power now or whatever. But you know, you do have the option of limiting this stuff. Here's a question from Jeff Wilson. The sales guys always come up with the dumb questions. Can you save presets to a thumb drive?
No, currently, no.
You couldn't before either.
No.
Well, no, before you could capture settings and save them to a clipboard.
You should still be able to do
But
that. I think settings are still here.
well, the other thing to remember too, and this is something that let's see if we've got it there.
We're looking
It
for,
wasn't critical parameters is where it was before.
yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think.
You don't have
Reports.
user settings and software settings anymore, so it's either reports or it's software. But That's something to take a note. What you can do, and William's got this, export everything in a preset to a clipboard. So before you went to critical parameters, you could capture settings and it put all that stuff to your clipboard by default. Because this is all HTML5, you can just open the preset screens and just copy paste the whole thing. Just drag and drop because it is text. Now, before with Flash, you couldn't do that. So let's see, we are at 3:02. There's still stuff coming in. So, I mean, Scotty, if you don't have anything pressing to do, we can carry on for another 4 or 5 minutes.
That's fine.
I say 3:02. I have not made the time change on my clock at the desktop here. I've left it at, it's going to stay standard time. It's my little protest. But yeah, so if you go to your preset menu and you open a preset and hit edit, because again, this is HTML5, not Flash, you do have the ability to just drag and drop and copy all the text by dragging your mouse over it and highlighting it. And then you just right click, copy to your clipboard, and then paste it into whatever document you want. So, you know, that way you might want to copy 1 or 2 presets, but not every preset in the transmitter. So again, options. All right, anything else we need to think about?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, well, you're the only other person with a mic
So
open.
the only other thing I might as well point out is this transmitter does have a processor inside, like the Orban inside. So if you go to the other settings, they have it enabled and they've selected the Orban preset C mic rock. And that's why our modulation level is what it is, even though our audio level is considerably lower than our 100% mod set point.
Yeah, that's Matt using his custom settings. He's running off his iPod this morning.
Yes.
So I don't even want to know what we're playing. Hopefully he hasn't got the RDS running so we can't see what it's actually playing anyway.
Well, we can see if
All
we've
right.
got RDS on.
And that's
Wow,
something else to remember. You can look at the baseband. I probably leave mine on baseband more than I look at the actual spectrum.
So yeah, it looks like he's got RDS. I don't know what information if any, he's
Right.
sending in,
Well,
but
again, he's running his audio through an iPod, so it's not like he's feeding the metadata in anyway.
no,
As I'm pretty sure he doesn't have the middleware setting up in his backyard. Well, he's got this
probably
set in his
not.
office at home. Um, so let's see, presets to a thumb drive. So Wally's asking about the preset scheduler, and that one is still, does it exist on this at all?
Well, it's certainly an option. I have
Well,
not
let's go.
tried. I haven't played with it yet, but
Well, let's go play and see what happens.
well, it
So
looks like there's a bunch of
scheduler,
rules.
yeah. So the scheduler is similar to the old preset and or the old AUI, but basically you build rules based on calendar day, time of day. You can do a from now until now. Do this at this time of day. You can tell when it repeats. You can select an end time. Um, so you could have it, for example, one of the things that I use it for is switching audio sources at time of day. Say you've got a satellite feed coming in on your analog left, right, and you normally run composite during the day and switch to satellite at night. You could have a preset for each and use the scheduler to switch back and forth. Something else a lot of folks will use if you are running a translator and want to put a dedicated ID on it rather than running FSK, which you can also do. But rather than running a dedicated ID or to run a dedicated ID, instead of having like a string of 20 different call signs at the top of the hour, you could put the call sign for that translator on a USB stick and then use the scheduler to select the USB stick at the top of the hour. It's a little less elegant and it's going to chop whatever was playing, so your timing it had to be pretty impeccable, but it's an option.
So yeah, the scheduler works, by the way.
Yeah.
Same,
So
pretty well same as before.
So the scheduler, yeah, I mean, it's a rudimentary automation system. It's not meant to replace an automation system, but in a pinch, I mean, if you run backhoe fade through the fiber connecting the studio to the transmitter site, if you've got your scheduler built up in advance, then you can, you could have it take over the whole session with that and the audio backup. You can run pretty much everything from the transmitter site. Now, on that note, we've covered everything in the questions. Oh, here we go. That's a good question. Is it possible to change the screen background color? And that's more a question for Matt, but I think right now the answer is no. Is that
Yeah,
accurate, Scott?
I don't know how you would do it, to be honest.
Oh,
I've not tried it.
it wouldn't be hard to add the code, but I don't think we've got it at the moment. And that is something, yeah, I can see themes being an option for this. It wouldn't be hard to do software-wise. I think primarily the function at this point has been getting it functional without losing a lot of functionality from what folks have come to expect with the existing AUI. But that's certainly a feature set that wouldn't be hard to accommodate. And I say wouldn't be hard. I mean, everything's easy if you get enough time and money. But uh, but yeah, that one I'm going to jot a note down for that one because that one will go back to Matt as soon as we get off this call. Themes, that's the word I'm looking for. All right, well, on that note, we were running to 8 minutes past the top of the hour. Typically, we run about 10 minutes after, so by
We're
my
early.
metric, we're right on time and a little bit early. Scott, I want to thank you for taking so much of your day with us because it's always fun and educational.
No problem. My pleasure.
And folks, those of you who've hung with us right through the bitter end, I am going to take control back and switch to the mandatory closeout screens. But I do want to thank you all for your time today. And as always, this archive will be, well, this webinar will be archived. See, Scott's done all the talking, so it's been long enough that I haven't really had to learn how to string the words together. Um, Definitely hit up our webinars. You can go to the resources tab on our website, or you can go to the youtube.com, search for Nautel, and they've got it broken down. They've even got the TTTs I discovered last night broken into a little playlist, which is kind of cool if you're masochistic enough to run through all 53 of them in sequence. Um, Other online sources, we got Barry Michigan's BDR, Broadcaster's Desktop resource shown here. There's broadcastengineering.info, which is a page started by engineers for engineers and is pretty firmly focused on not too much, I guess, diversions or extraneous stuff. Um, Facebook pages coming out the wazoo. Pick a topic, there's a Facebook page for it. Transmitter sites, broadcast engineers, engineering. I monitor some of them. I know other folks do as well. The old standbys, radiolists.net, pubtech.org, crtech.org. There's just, we've got so many resources for stuff, whereas 25 years ago, it was call me or Scott, and we'd just sit there paging through the book with you and try to figure it all out. So definitely, I want to thank everybody for taking the time. And there, look, see, we're right at 10 after. It's like I knew what I was doing. Uh, Thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to be with us. And on that note, we will see you all next week. Next week, we are talking about, let's see, it's our pre-US Thanksgiving session. We're talking about how to hopefully keep the phone from ringing. Going to have Dan Gunter from Alabama Broadcast Services. I think we'll have some fun. So hopefully we'll see you all next week. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye now.